question so that everyone in the audience can hear. Woman right here.
You set the context beautifully of Belfast in the 70s and also the 90s, and I'm very curious as to why you have completely left out the loyalist paramilitary organizations and the Royal Ulster Constabulary's relationship with them.
It's a different film, basically.
It's the same city, it's the same time, and it's the
Sure,
same history.
it's an interesting
would have been
question.
something that Clive Owen would have been battling within the RUC as he tried to go back through Castlereagh records and it's just like totally left out, not even hinted at.
I think it's a hard question to answer in a way because this is a story we chose to tell. And the question was why we didn't make a different film, basically. In other words, the Northern situation is very complicated. There's a Protestant loyalist faction with endless factions, to be honest with you, and there's a whole complex power structure there between the RUC and MI5 and the British Army. And in a sense, our idea was to try and distill this into a human story, not a political story, and keep the bigger picture, which is endlessly complicated, sort of in the background. And as it impacts on the characters, of course, you see that. And the Clive Owen character does indeed deal with the RUC. That's the uniformed gentleman you see going into the building. But, you know, without trying to be sarcastic, you try to tell a story as you see it, and that story didn't involve the endless, complex, situation in the north of Ireland. There are many other documentary films that do that.
Great.
Actually,
Andrea.
one of the things that really drew me to the story, because it's totally valid what you're saying, and there are so many sides, and almost too much information to compass in one small film. It was really a glimpse that we were trying to achieve, but a very emotional one. But one of the things that drew me to exploring this particular situation in this way was that at the beginning of the film, as it unravels, then you realise the situation we're in, and by that time, you're already somewhat with the breath and heart of Colette, as she's in this extreme state of anxiety. Had the political blueprint been laid out for us as a premise, we might not go into it with as open a heart, I suppose. And it's such a very small. I didn't feel that. That was my feeling. I didn't feel that. But
So biased.
Down in front.
Hi, Mr. March. I was just wondering, I feel like there's not a lot of filmmakers who can successfully transition between documentary and narrative. And I was wondering what that process is like for you and where do you feel most at home?
So the question was about Mr. Marsh's transition between documentary and narrative, and where does he feel most at home?
I like doing both, obviously, and one informs the other. But the objective, ultimately, is always the same, is to fill the empty canvas when you start with images that tell a story. And the means of production is very different in a feature film than it is in a documentary, but the overriding objectives in my documentaries, I try and make them unfold like narrative films as best I can. So there's definitely a big overlap between the skill set, I guess, as well as the objective is pretty much the same.
In the center.
I noticed that there were certain places that I was curious about your concept for use of score, because I feel like you placed a lot of the big emotional moments completely silent. It's completely absent. The score is completely absent, but then the score also comes in to help almost set tone. And I was wondering if that was an intention, or if you could talk about that.
It's about myself, actually. That was the idea. When we first cut the film, we left the score off completely. Often you're tempted to nudge things and sort of wallpaper the whole movie with score to make it work, but it felt a more honest way to the material to only bring score in really towards the end of the editing process, is what happened on this film. I think also I overscored Project Nim a bit. I learned from that, as it was a bit promiscuous with score. So I think as a reaction to that, which speaks to your question too in a way, I learned from that and make this a much more spare kind of score.
and watching it objectively afterward, that's how it felt when we were filming in those moments. In those moments of the peak of tension and this utter silence, I think that's where James truly expressed what it was to be voiceless, almost to be
my follow-up question, so you didn't cut the temp at all? Like you
We did, I mean, when we done the first couple of assemblies, we began to kind of leak score into it. We used some score from Animal Kingdom that was very helpful. Then we took that off, and then Dickon came in and responded to the film. Dickon initially wrote the music, he wrote music for him as well as decorating and so on.
Any questions? Ah, very back, thank you. So the question was, it just seemed the film being very even-handed throughout until we got to the end, and I felt that it was a little more heavy-handed towards the IRA or brutal. Yeah.
I try to free myself of any kind of overall moral or political sort of statements with it. And I don't think it's about that, but I think it's about this family in these extraordinary circumstances, how people, have many possible choices. And I don't think it's particularly judgmental on the Republican movement or the IRA. But clearly there are, at the time there was a conflict going on, and the conflict was going on both sides. And I think that Clive Owen's character does a very cynical thing when he makes the phone call, which he knows what's going to happen when he makes that phone call. So there's no good, good sort of moral presence from him in the story as well. So, but Andrew, I think you thought a lot about that when you were doing it. I mean, you had to, I guess, when you were doing it in the first place.
I think that certainly in Great Britain, we were protected from another version of the truth. And upon researching it and being in that world, it was our reporting was very biased the other way. So it was fascinating to make all sorts of discoveries that I really I had no idea about. And this was part of my history because I am British and because it's something that we learn in school. It's by no means a footnote. It's a very important part of our education. And I actually had no idea. I'd say about 80% of any of this. I had no idea about the unemployment. 85% at its peak in those areas. People were literally hungry and angry. I thought it was a very unique way to explore it. Truly, I think we would have to make, I can't even imagine how many films we would have to make. And they would start off really with the beginning of what we now call the British Isles. Because it goes before Elizabeth I, before Cromwell, before Elizabeth I, way back. The oldest building in the world is in Ireland. So there's a lot of history there and a lot of deep pain.
That also speaks to your question earlier that you just can't take on this subject and do right by it in a 90-minute film. You have to find a little fragment, a little point of access in a human way, in a family in this case.
There's a philosophical difference about whether or not we create art. You're part of you're unavoidably you're part of a political context. And so I would say yes to that, and I think you might say no.
I think that's my duty, perhaps. That would be the difference.
See, I think you can't.
I think also this slice of this woman's life, for example, is all that a woman who was living this life would have had. That was her slice. She actually wouldn't have been party to a lot of the political decisions at the top. either, even though she is actively on the ground, so to speak. So I think that that's valuable. I think sometimes those very private moments are immediate and human and worthy of exploring. Whether we can do the entire situation, total justice is always difficult.
Do you have a question in the center back?
First, I just want to say that I love the film. I thought it was fantastic, both the directing and the acting. I was just wondering, with a movie that's kind of open to interpretation on some of the parts, do you ever feel like it would just be easier to tell what's happening instead of showing it?
I think it'd be a lot easier. But in a sense, I'm trusting you. I want you to complete the film for yourself. The same is true of Project Name and Lead Man on Wire, where you want people to literally, complete the film. And so this is quite a complex story that I'm asking you to kind of put together at the end, I guess. And I don't really mind which way you do it. But I think that's, as an audience member, that's what I prefer when I see a film, is to be trusted a little bit. Well, thank you.
There was a lot of pressure on my face in this film.
Yes.
And I think it's quite extraordinary when you're in such an extraordinary, when one is in such an extraordinary situation as this. The ambiguity that comes across truly is born from something very deep inside, because the character truly does not know what they're going to do from minute to minute, and they're feeling so many, thousands of things at once. So I can only hope that my eyebrows, lips and cheeks served in some way to make clarity.
One in the front.
I think this is one of the best films I've seen as Sundance, and I think the acting was absolutely elegant. I want to know what's happening.
So compliments to the film, the acting and the directing, and wants to know what's next.
We're going to do loads of press. In the general sense.
Well, I really don't know what's going to happen to this film.
Oh, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen to it. Yeah, we just finished it. We finished it last week. So it's, this is literally the second time it's been seen by the public. So I guess as the festival unfolds, maybe people want to distribute it. I just don't know.
So I have one time for one more question. The gentleman.
How many days to shoot?
That's a good question.
So it's how many days to shoot?
34. Oh, we have a producer. Chris Cohen. Thank you very much. 34 days. We did 5-day weeks, which was surprising.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much.